we discuss our test results from the all-new 2019 Mercedes-Benz A-Class. Then we talk about what to do if you have a problem with a brand new car and why that might not be uncommon. And finally, we answer our audience questions, including ones about why windshields cost so much these days. Next on Talking Cars. Hey, welcome back. I'm Keith Barry.
I'm Ryan Pizlakowski.
And I'm Mike Quincy.
And today we're going to get right into a news story that we saw and thought was very interesting in the Detroit Free Press, talking about some issues with the new Ford Explorer and Lincoln Aviator. Now, these are two incredibly important cars for Ford, three-row SUVs. These are big sellers, the Explorer especially, big nameplate for Ford, but it looks like there are some issues. All new cars, but all new problems. Anyone want to kind of fill in? Anyone read the homework?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
They quoted manufacturing issues where the cars are going from the factory to another factory to fix what the first factory couldn't quite get right. There's also the articles were talking about issues that for cars that have been delivered to real customers. One person was quoted in the article with a problem-filled aviator who said, "I'm tired of being the guinea pig."
Yeah,
and that's certainly an issue that we've seen.
Someone else was quoted in there too. Our own Jake Fisher.
That's right,
and that's because our car had some issues. We have an Aviator,
right,
and something's funky with it. There's like some Ghost in the Machine stuff happening.
Yeah. So the dash, the instrument cluster is a big TV screen, basically. It doesn't work sometimes. It was flickering on and off. It would just turn off. And it's kind of important because that tells you how fast you're going and all kinds of important things.
Yeah, it's like John Candy, trains, planes, and automobiles. The whole dash is just burnt out.
Yeah, so it's a brand new car. It's a major issue because, like I said, you can't see the speed you're going. There's a lot of controls go through there. It's unfortunate, but these cars are so technologically advanced nowadays that this is becoming more common, that you're seeing these issues. And it's not like the wires fell off of your tachometer and you don't have a tachometer. You don't have the whole dash.
Right.
It's a lot different than it was.
But this isn't I like what you said. I mean, this isn't just Ford. I mean, I know that the Freep sort of picked on that, and it's especially, I think it's a news story for them because Ford spent a lot of money revamping the plant, and it's a whole new platform, and the car's all new. But we see this problem with cars from all kinds of manufacturers. Every manufacturer, sure. Almost. We've seen something, and you folks have both been here longer than I have.
Well, right,
but some of the stuff you've seen.
But a story like this, kind of rightly so, shines some light on Consumer Reports' own reliability information. And I think the misconception is that people think that we base our reliability predictions on our test car, which is not the case. Right. So before we start saying that the Explorer and the Aviator are going to be reliability nightmares, we really have to see data. So we survey our members, we ask them about any problems that they've had with their car over the last 12 months, and you begin to see patterns of issues. And if enough of our members are saying, oh, the instrument panel on my Aviator also flaked out on me, they're going to click that box, and we're going to see a development that says, okay, we think that this is a real trouble spot. But until we see the data, we can't jump to these conclusions. We can't
generalize off of one car.
Right. But delivery, getting a new car delivery and having problems with it is not unusual. I've bought 145 cars for our test program, and I've had issues with cars. There's no gas, the clock isn't set right, the radio is blaring, but specifically, I picked up a Jaguar XJL for our test program. The left side of the stereo didn't work. You couldn't initialize the nav system. Went back to the dealer the next day. Took delivery of a Camry. Normally you think
not a
reliable.
JLR.
Right. So we're jumping from one extreme to the other. Took delivery of a Camry. The center rear seatbelt attachment was buried into the back seat. The service department had to take apart the back seat to dig it out.
I remember that.
So I mean, these things happen when you get a new car. It's not necessarily an issue with the factory. Sometimes it's about dealer prep as well. But sometimes, yes, no doubt that some cars leave the factory almost complete nightmares.
So what should people do? Because I mean, I see on our board where we have the cars listed, cars with like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 miles, sometimes 50 miles.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Have a sticker that say,
200
"Don't drive,
miles, yeah.
going to the dealer."
25 miles, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, we take them back to the dealer. Obviously, they're still under warranty and they're covered, but it's still a nuisance. If you buy a brand new car, you're gonna be frustrated. You gotta bring it back to the dealer. We generally tell people to stay away from major redesigned vehicles. So
Like these.
yeah, so it's completely new. There's a lot of new stuff in there. So there's a greater chance of an issue just because they don't quite have it ironed out maybe all the way yet.
And it can happen to even traditionally reliable brands.
Right.
I mean, Subaru, for example, has had some teething issues with some of their redesigns, and Subaru generally is a good, reliable brand. So.
Yeah, the Corolla that we got in had an issue with the same issue with the speaker as the Jaguar XJ.
Right.
And that was a total brand new redesign. I'm not going to say don't buy a Corolla, but that particular car had that one car, sample size of one, had an issue.
And just to bring it back to Ford, it's not as easy just to say, well, it's a Ford or it's a Lincoln, to sweep it under the rug, because in our last our most recent brand report card, Lincoln was the top performing domestic model. So when you're looking at overall performance and reliability, Lincoln came in number 8, but Ford was number 20 out of 33. So it's not like Ford doesn't know how to build reliable models. It doesn't imply that Ford doesn't know anything about mass production, because they do, obviously, with Lincoln. But we really have to wait and see how both these models pan out in our next survey.
And if you're buying a car, maybe wait and see.
Yeah, if you can wait for that second, third year, it's you might have better luck.
Yeah, we have reached out to Ford. We haven't heard back anything yet at the time of this recording. So moving on to another new car, one that's slightly different than a 3-row SUV. We've just finished testing the 2019 Mercedes-Benz A-Class. This is the first time we've seen the A-Class in the U.S. It's a small sedan, which is like sort of a category that isn't doing so great in the U.S. right now. It's almost $44,000 as we have it equipped. And I remember when the small Mercedes, it wasn't that long ago, you could get one from under 30.
Yeah.
What do we think about this car? We finished testing, Mike. What do you?
Well, I mean, I like a small sports sedan. To me, the A-Class is just the right size. I've said before in this podcast, I'm getting saturated with SUVs, so I like to get into a real car with good handling and whatnot. The interior of our A-Class looks really classy. The driving dynamics are really solid. I like the steering. I like the handling. I thought it was really tossable. But, and this is where it all goes into the weeds, the high dash and the short windshield, to me, made the whole thing feel rather confining. I remember two generations Mercedes C-Classes ago, the dash was low. You had that great visibility. It was a nice, airy cabin. I'm definitely not getting that feeling with the A-Class. The controls in our model are absolutely infuriating. The little touch sensitive steering wheel buttons are too easy to
there are
switch
3
stuff.
different ways that you can interact with the screen. It's either a touch screen, there's a touch pad, and then there are these 2 tiny little buttons, remember,
on the steering wheel.
And they're touch buttons, and they're sensitive if you go left to right and up and down.
You just slightly brush over them, and you can change the radio station.
And you don't know what you changed because you weren't paying attention.
Even
if
you don't want to. So to prepare for this podcast, I sat in our A-Class. I turned the car on. I left it in park. And I was going through the controls and going through them, and just sitting there fussing with these things. I thought it's unnerving to do it while I'm stationary. And we all make adjustments to the car while we're driving. Maybe it's the climate system. Maybe it's the radio. Maybe it's even the seat. And I can't even do it when I'm not moving.
This is one of those cars for me where I get outside the gate, headed home, and I have to park off to the side, and I have to get situated and just figure out what's what, because it's so overwhelming. And in a small car that should be easy to jump in and go home real quick, it's not a big A8 or a big S-Class or something that's complicated. It should be complicated.
Right.
I'm sitting there for 20 minutes trying to just get my bearings. What is this thing? It's chaos to me. Driving it isn't terrible. It's a little too small for me in general. The C-Class is a much better fit. I'm just a little bit bigger. I think it handles better too. This car is small and nimble, but the steering, I didn't care for the steering all that much. But it's it's just a frustrating little car.
Right.
And it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
Right.
So I always plug in my phone. I have an iPhone, so always CarPlay pops up. So it kind of takes away some of the issues with it. But still, those buttons can also, if you have the cord for your phone, it can hit the touchpad and all of a sudden change the song.
Right.
Your center display will start showing something other than how fast you're going. The other thing about it is, although the interior is, it has like mood lighting. You can change it so it has different colors, and I actually think it's a real cool interior.
And
It is
the vents for the heat and ventilation system.
They harken back to that Mercedes.
They're really stylish.
They're solid and stylish.
Oh, it's very good looking interior.
Yeah.
But they spent no money on a little panel that runs along where it hits your knee, that runs along the side of the center console, and it's incredibly sharp. And if you're wearing shorts, which
it needs it because it's tight in there. So my leg's resting against it, guaranteed. But the back seat is almost. If I'm driving, you're not sitting behind me. There's no room in that back seat.
Oh no, the back seat is incredible. Now the trunk space is actually pretty good. The trunk space is incredible. But
we're seeing this pattern of ultra complicated controls in a lot of high-end models, whether it's Mercedes or BMW or Lexus. And to me, they become such a burden to have to deal with. I don't want to drive the cars, which is not what you want as a manufacturer.
And the Genesis G70 is a sports sedan, and you get in and go.
It's simple.
Yeah.
And I'd much rather take the Genesis than any of those of the cars of the brands that I just mentioned, just for that reason.
I don't mean to drag this out.
I think it's the wrong approach for any manufacturer.
I got another problem with this car. I'm sorry.
have
for all that I actually like this car, I actually have taken this car on a lot of weekends.
And
it's kind of one of those.
You're taking one for the team. That's what you're doing.
I like it. I like it. But the lane keeping assist is
aggressive,
It is incredibly aggressive, and we've noticed this in a lot of Mercedes. You're driving, if you just go over the lane a little bit, sometimes some cars it'll kind of hit the steering wheel, some cars it'll kind of nudge you back in your lane. This one almost feels like you've blown a tire.
It yanks
makes this noise.
Our back roads here, there's a lot of narrow roads with it's going off all the time, and it's so aggressive that I feel like it's a hindrance. It's I don't want to say dangerous, but it shocks
it's scary.
you. It pulls you way out of the way. And it's like, that's not necessary. Like, vibrate the wheel a little bit or just nudge me back. But it just hunkers you down. It puts the brakes on, like, pretty heavily.
Especially if you're intentionally trying to cross that line to pass construction or a pothole.
And then it pulls you back towards that whatever you were trying to get away from.
Aggressively. So if that sounds good to you, then you're going to love what we have to say about the new CLA class, a 2020 model. It's based on a similar platform, slightly different, a little bit of a different roof line. The back end is a little more tapered, kind of has that CL look to it.
I think it looks a little better, but it's $1,000 more from what we've
and has some fewer features. So we just bought this. People have been putting miles on it to get up to that 2,000, so we can start our full tests. So you can read pretty soon. You'll be able to read our first impressions on it, our first drive. But if you want a preview of that, check out our full review of the A-Class, which is now at consumerreports.org. So now on to what's my favorite part of the show, is when we get to take a little bit of a break. I get to have a sip of water and get some coffee because you take over. You send us your video questions at TalkingCars@iCloud.com. We love video questions. Our first one comes from Kurt, and it's about tires. I wonder who's going to be answering that.
Hello, Talking Cars. I'm watching Ryan test tires in the wet on Consumer 101. And I was just wondering if the same tire, make, model, and brand performs differently in a rear-wheel drive car, front-wheel drive car, or all-wheel drive car. Another question I have is, does the type of surface make a difference also? Because I know that not all tarmacs are created the same. Thanks a lot. I really enjoy watching your podcast every week and Consumer 101 on TV. So keep up the good work. See you guys later.
So Kurt, thanks for watching Consumer 101. For the rest of you out there, check your local listings. You'll get more of us.
Especially someone in a deer costume. But,
I have nothing to say about that. Ryan, tires. This is a really good question.
Yeah, this is a great question. So the first part is the front wheel drive, all wheel drive, rear wheel drive. So if you took you took the same brand, model, tire, everything, and put it on those three different cars. The vehicles, they might have different handling dynamics and characteristics, but it's important to remember when we do our testing for that 1 year, so like this past year we tested UHP, ultra high performance, summer, all season, and then winter tires. Those are all tested on the same vehicle, same size, same vehicle.
A very cool Toyota 86.
Toyota 86, yeah, fun little cars.
Rear-wheel drive.
Rear-wheel drive. In the past, we've used the front-wheel drive cars for that test. We've used all-wheel drive cars for that test. But it's important to remember that they're all being tested on that same car for that same year. So like you can't compare these results this year with the rear-wheel drive car to a year when we did it with a front-wheel drive car, because it can be different. We would still expect the results to still have the same rank order or very similar rank order. We pick a car that we think is representative of the segment and is sensitive to help us, pull the differences out of these tires. There would be differences in the car's handling per se, as you went from those different vehicles, but that doesn't really matter for us, because we're testing them all on that one same vehicle. And then he asked a great question about surfaces. There's different friction levels of surfaces. There's asphalt, there's concrete. We don't test on concrete. Concrete around here is very rare, almost completely unheard of. I know there's places that do have concrete, but we test on an asphalt that's actually the same recipe that we use on Connecticut roads. So we're using a real world scenario for surface, but we can only do so much. We can't have the same exact asphalt that you have in Texas or California or Ohio. Okay?
Right. We're not dealing with Texas heat. They're not dealing with Connecticut cold.
Right. So again, we would still expect the same or a similar rank order. A grippy tire is going to be a grippy tire. And we do, like some of these surfaces, we actually burnish them, bring them, the mu value is a friction coefficient, the levels down to well-traveled roads. So what all of that means is we cover all bases here. We make sure that the tires are all tested the same. We're paying attention to the surfaces, the vehicles we're using. We're paying attention to all
and the best part is for more information, we have so much information about tires at consumerreports.org. I'm sorry, I could do a little plug here, but we Ryan and Gene and all the tire guys, they do an awesome job, and we've got a ton of information about tires.
Thank you.
Yeah. So from tires to windshields, we have a question from Peter. Take it away, Peter.
Hi, Talking Cars. This is Peter in Staten Island. About a month ago, my daughter just purchased this brand new 2019 Subaru Forester. Recently, a friend of hers sent her an article where the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has been getting a lot of complaints about cracked windshields in 2018, 2019 Subaru Foresters and 2020 Kia Tellurides. I mean, how concerned should we be about it since the car is used for work pretty much every day? Also, the article says that replacement windshields take weeks to get replacements. That's also a concern if the car is not going to be usable for a period of time if windshield does crack. So I'd like to get your insight on this issue. Any further information you have, appreciate it. Keep up the good work. As I said, always been a long-time listener, enjoyed the podcast. Take care.
So I think what Peter is talking about is NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, has what's called a complaints database. And it's if you see that there's something wrong with your car and you suspect that it's due to a safety defect, you can go on to NHTSA's website, nhtsa.gov, and file a formal complaint. Yeah. And it's interesting. These are sometimes what make recalls happen. Not always, but every so often it's a series of complaints from people who own cars really make a difference. We saw one last week. One person noticed an issue in an owner's manual in a Honda. There was a mistake. Right. They submitted a complaint to NHTSA. NHTSA sent out something to Honda. Honda had to send out new owner's manuals to people.
You can make a difference.
You can really make a difference.
This is consumer action here.
And they really do. I mean, they really do take these into account. Of course, there has to be an investigation. You have to have a certain number of these. You can't, there has to be some, like you were talking about with the new cars earlier, there has to be a lot of data points before you can actually act on something. Right. It can be frustrating for consumers. I have a problem now. I want it fixed. Yeah. But in order for an agency to act, it's sometimes, you need to have that concrete information.
Yeah, and in order for Consumer Reports to act, we have to see a pattern of component failure. and in this case, windshields. And we do compile verbatim comments from our members to try to get an idea of really specifically what kind of issues are they having, how it's breaking it, and whatnot. And we're in the midst of gathering data for our next survey, so we're gonna be able to find out if more people are telling us about their issues with either their Forester windshields or the Telluride windshield, and we're going to be able to see patterns and say, well, we think this is a trouble spot.
And just out of curiosity, we have both of these cars here, so I checked, and they're made by different manufacturers. But
the windshields.
But windshields today are getting more complicated in general. You'd think it's just a thing you look out of, it's a piece of glass, but it's,
I mean, back in the day, it was just a big old piece of glass. They'd glue it in place and off you went. They'd glue the rearview mirror back on the inside and off you went. But, so these Subarus that have eyesight, they have these eyesight systems that are looking through the glass.
Yeah.
When the windshield breaks and you have to put a new windshield in, they have to put all that stuff, take it off the old windshield, put it on the new windshield, and then they have to recalibrate it so that it's seeing correctly through the glass. There's Range Rovers that have filaments in the windshield that defrost, which work really well.
Right.
But that's an expensive windshield.
Right.
I mean, it's not a simple fix, and you don't just, the guy that comes to your backyard, the local guy that comes to your backyard, probably can't do those jobs anymore. Because they're complicated.
We're seeing people that used to come to our track to replace windshields. Maybe there's one guy's getting older,
independent,
and he's like, I don't want to go through all the training to learn about recalibrating eyesight and whatnot.
Right. And he might not even be able to do it himself anyway. He has to go to a dealer, and it's just a.
It's like replacing these things. It's a real pain in the glass.
Yeah, but we're seeing, speaking of which, we're seeing a lot of, CR had a big investigation into exploding sunroofs. Yeah. And we're seeing, as there is more glass in a car, people want brightness. They want what's called a big greenhouse, is what you call the sum total of all the glass in the car. Right. You're seeing when there's more glass, when cars are bigger, when their windshields are bigger, there's more to break. So I guess what I can say is this is something we'll keep an eye on. And if you're out there and you're having a problem with your car and you think it's a safety issue, go to NHTSA's website, file a complaint, because it's that sort of preponderance of evidence that moves those forward.
Enough people.
Yeah, and if enough people complain, then sometimes something happens. Maybe it might not be a recall, but it might force the manufacturer at least to create some sort of a technical service bulletin or take notice or change a part. So thanks. We love questions like that. Our final question is written in by Philip, who says he just got back from a 3-week trip to Sweden and France. Ooh. And as a car enthusiast, I was transfixed by which cars I saw on the roads. What struck me was the sheer abundance of cars that you generally say are not reliable. Volkswagen, Volvo, BMW, etc. Japanese-made vehicles, on the other hand, were few and far between. Why do you think this is? Do European drivers not care about reliability like Americans do? Do they not drive as many miles as we do in the U.S.? Yes. And he'd love to hear our thoughts. So,
Sounds like a nice vacation.
Yeah,
just looking at cars.
Well, what he said is, what struck me about his question is when he said, what you see on the road, it kind of comes back to, it's sort of anecdotal. It's like, well, I saw this or I saw that, and that's just simply not how Consumer Reports compiles reliability.
You can be in Beverly Hills and see a lot of Range Rovers.
Right, and
a lot of unreliable vehicles.
Exactly.
And we hear it from people all the time that we'll say something, we'll produce data that shows that, for example, a Toyota Camry has a good reliability history.
And my Camry got a seatbelt stuck in the back.
Well, there's that too. But we'll get letters or emails from people saying, you say the Camry is reliable, but my neighbor had one and it broke down, and therefore your data is inaccurate. Which of course is ridiculous, but I mean I think people, whether people are living in Germany or Sweden, all consumers should care about good reliability.
Right.
Well, they're different cars too, right? So they're cars that are made they're made for different areas. Right. They're made in different plants. They're different designs, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So some of these cars may actually be. They're not the cars we're getting or we're reporting our reliability data on. These are European-built cars. So. Or spec cars. So the parts are coming from maybe different places. Some of these cars, you see a Mercedes or a BMW over in Europe, it's not the high-end fancy versions that we have here a lot of times. They're actually very stripped, basic versions, which would maybe be a little more reliable.
And with probably more manual transmissions.
Right.
Well.
It's a different. I think it's a different culture over there too. They're enthusiasts. They they really love. They're into that stuff.
But it's easier to not own a car there.
But the fuel is more expensive.
Oh yeah.
So they probably want something that's
right.
smaller. They want something that's more fuel efficient.
You're not driving crazy miles. You're not, it's not, I have to get to work. The other thing is the cars tend to be kept longer. Some of that has to do with, there's some really crazy inspections that happen there. I mean, there are states in the U.S. that don't even have safety inspections. And there are ones that I think not no vehicle, but a lot of vehicles on the road in the U.S. wouldn't pass.
Yeah. Right.
I have friends who are enthusiasts in Europe, and they talk about getting their MOT or getting their TÜV or whatever these things are, and they're unbelievable.
Yeah,
they go through these. Oh yeah, and also because cars are newer, people tend to get them repaired at dealers more often, and they're taken care of. It's a slightly different. Americans, we're really hard on cars.
Yeah, well,
our roads are in rough shape.
And the roads. Also, American roads are pretty brutal on cars.
Yeah, and the weather. I mean, it's just sort of, if you're talking about per country. I mean, and also, if you think about it, Volkswagen, Volvo, BMW, compared to Rovers and Lancias and cars from years ago from Europe, these are the more reliable ones.
They are, exactly.
We have a moment of silence for Keith because he really likes French cars.
But there is...
Oh, please bring back Peugeot.
There's some history here. And I think that it's sort of the cars within Europe became more popular in other European countries before Japanese cars did. So there's some cultural history as well. Yeah. That maybe when I was growing up, the Camry was the sort of reliable car. Right. But for people in England, maybe it was the Volkswagen was the reliable car. So there's still that history too. Like you said, it's culture. Yeah. So
good question.
Great question. So that's about all the time we have. Whether you have a question about the cars you saw on vacation or tires or testing, just send it along to TalkingCars@iCloud.com. And we love video questions too. They give us a break and they let you take over and talk cars for a while. So thanks so much. If you want to check out the show notes, you can find links to all the cars we talked about today in great detail. Learn all kinds of stuff and become an expert. Thanks for talking cars with us. We'll see you soon.